ॐ सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। In this session of the webinar, we are going to take up this question. What happens when one dies? We will mainly consider certain light thrown by no other scripture than Bhagavad Gita. Then we will sprinkle 2 or 3 quotes from Upanishads also. As all of you know, in the very first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna goes into a state of despair, despondency, seeing that this war will entail the death of large numbers on both sides of the battle. He makes statements like, even if they kill me, I don't want to kill them. Etan na hantumichhami gnatopi madhusudana. First chapter, 35th verse. Then there are many other verses where he describes the scenario as most undesirable, horrific, and puts his bow down, saying, I am not going to fight this war. Then in the second chapter begins Sri Krishna's teaching in great details. And how does Sri Krishna start? He shakes Arjuna by saying, what are you talking? No one is going to die here. No one ever was absent on this earth. No one ever will be absent on this earth. In the 12th verse of second chapter, Sri Krishna says, Natvevaham jatunasam natvam neme janadipaha. In that verse he says, there was no time. Go back if you like centuries, go back if you like thousands of years. There was no time when you were not there, I was not there, or all these kings were not there. And there will be no time for centuries to come, for thousands of years to come, when you, I, or these kings will not be there. That means death is a very superficial affair. In the same second chapter, he talks about the indestructibility of what you and I are on a deeper level. To bring a quote from Kathopanishad, which to 90% extent echoes in the Gita in that very chapter, but I'll tell the first line of the Kathopanishad mantra, Na jayate mriyate va vipaschit. You and I, far beyond the physical existence, are vipaschit, are a principle of intelligence, and it is neither born, nor jayate, nor dies, na mriyate. So, what is this so-called dying? Before we enter into the main part of the question, what happens after death? Let's say, or let's see a couple of statements from the Gita which talks about what death is. Then we will examine what happens after death. There is a very interesting metaphor. Sri Krishna says in the 13th shloka of the second chapter, Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara. Just as within one lifespan, every one of us goes through childhood, youth, middle age, old age, and so on. That is how we proceed to go to another body. Tatha dehantara prapti. That's not the metaphor. The verse a little later, 22nd verse, Sri Krishna gives the metaphor that dying is like changing clothes. Vasam sijirnani yatha vihaya, 22nd verse of the second chapter. Very well known, much quoted verse. Just as somebody discards old clothes and puts on new clothes, the jeevātmā. Nowadays, I am a bit averse to using the word soul, for I am told, I am yet to study it in great detail. I am told that the word soul may have its own connotations which are different from how Sanatana Dharma uses it. So let's use a Sanskrit word, the spirit or the inner truth which moves from one body to another. I'll call it jeevātmā. Jeevātmā leaves one body, that is called death, and before long takes another body. Just as anybody, lady or gentleman, discards old clothes and wears new ones. So Sri Krishna slowly prepares the ground for Arjuna to see things from a broader perspective. Arjuna has to have a wide angle view of life, then should have clarity about his own specific role. In dharma, we use two words, samanya dharma, vishesha dharma. Samanya dharma, like speak truth, don't tell lies, don't hurt others, help others, serve others, etc. is samanya dharma, common to all. Vishesha dharma is dependent on our personality, how we are made. Some of us are made for administration, some of us are made for teaching, some of us are made for research, some of us are made for dealing with money. So, various combinations of skills are to be considered, and then, with respect to how we are made by nature or by God or by our own past actions, our Vishesha Dharma is decided. Whole Bhagavad Gita helps Arjuna to have a deeper understanding of Samanya Dharma, common to all, also have great clarity about Vishesha Dharma, where he fits in the scheme of things. Before proceeding, there is also a verse in the second chapter, 26th, I must mention. I mentioned some shloka numbers because this video will be on YouTube, and many people, when they watch the YouTube later, and if I say, well, Sri Krishna says, even if you think there is death, you should not worry. Whereas Sri Krishna said it, especially 10% of those who watch the video are with scholarly inclinations. Loko bhinna ruchi. There are many people who get irritated by a speaker mentioning shloka numbers. They may even say, we don't need shloka numbers, we trust you, Swamiji. Just say what Sri Krishna says in the Gita. But there are always 10% of students who say, Swamiji, we trust you, but it will be helpful if you tell us which chapter, which shloka, so that we are more clear about how it is said, where it is said. So, Atachainam nitya jatam nityam va manyase mrutam. There is a shloka. Arjun, though I am telling you no one really dies, if you, because of your limited knowledge, imagine or think that there is actually death, There is actually birth, even them naivam shochitum arhasi. You ought not to grieve. You must not cry. Stop crying, find out what you ought to do, and just do it. Now I proceed. I leave the second chapter and leap to the sixth chapter. But quickly I want to mention when I was in high school and my English was so weak, but I was developing my English because up to 10th standard, 10th grade, I had studied all subjects in my mother tongue, Kannada. English was just one subject. But it was interesting. Ninth standard or so, we had what was called one act plays. A play, a drama, but in one act only. And in one of them, there was a powerful sentence: the valiant die but once, the cowards die again and again. When you and I do not have integrity, we compromise with everything, we are filled with fear and jealousy and negativities. Every now and then, we act in such a way, then we regret what we did, and all kinds of inner compromise is tantamount to death, according to that statement. The valiant die only once. They live a life of integrity, they do what they say, they go by their conscience, and if need be, they give their life. That is the spirit. Let it be. Now we come closer to the crux of the matter. What happens when one dies? In the Bhagavad Gita, there is no description of how after death the soul behaves 1 day after, 2 days after. Does it hang around for 10 days and on the 11th day does it move on to another region? Those are all found in some Garuda Purana and some other scriptures. Maybe I will take them up. I must myself study and prepare my points some other time. In the Bhagavad Gita, the focus is on spiritual sadhana, spiritual practices aimed at inner growth and then final emancipation. So, in the sixth chapter, for much of what I am saying is known to most of you, but it would be, I hope, refreshing for you to see with the special focus on death and then what follows death. In the sixth chapter, Arjuna raises a question. Suppose somebody has done a lot of sadhana, lot of spiritual practices, studied, did karma yoga, served people, or worshipped God, did some asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and so on, Raja Yoga. Did a little bhakti also, went to temples, went to holy places, and prayed God from the bottom of her heart, and did Jnana Yoga, studied Vedanta, Tattvabodha, Atmabodha, Viveka Chudamani, Ishavasya Upanishad, a lot of classes and broke her head on who am I? The question, who am I? So that's sadhana. Many of us have done this for decades, for a long time. And before we reach our goal, suppose we kick the bucket, we die, so to say. Arjuna asks, what happens to somebody who, before reaching one's goal, dies? That's where, to an extent, Gita throws light on what happens. Reiterating the concept of rebirth, Sri Krishna says in that context, and first of all, he begins with a very reassuring tone. Arjuna, know for sure, nobody who has done sadhana, spiritual practices, will come to ruin, will come to harm. Whatever he or she has done will stand by him or her. And in that particular shloka 6.40, there is that very reassuring statement. Nahi kalyanakrit kaschit durgatim tata gacchati. My dear Arjuna, nobody who has done some good work, served others, or worked upon himself through japa, meditation, study, and so on, all that is good work. You serve people, it's good. You live righteously, nobody notices, with door and windows closed. Instead of doing something which brings you down, you do certain things which raise you spiritually. Sadhana. Then Kalyanakrit. Kalyana here means good, meritorious. A performer of meritorious deeds, believe me, will not go down or suffer in some way. On the contrary, he goes further up. He picks up where he had left. And in the sixth chapter, in the last few shlokas, Sri Krishna says, somebody upon dying, and if he had done a lot of meritorious acts, continues to rise in two possible ways. Some of them are born in such environment which is very conducive to spiritual learning and growing. Srimatam gehe yoga brashtaha vijayate. That itself is marvelous. That itself gives great hope, great assurance. It consoles us. Thank God what I have done in this life, though in this life I didn't seem to be rewarded much by it, it will come handy. It will stand by me in next life. Happy to know that. So we are born in such environment where at least we don't have to waste our time and energy on earning our daily bread and so on. On one hand, materially also pretty much prosperous. On the other, environment, opportunities to continue one's study and so on will be available. Another thing that can happen after one dies is, after a certain period of maybe going to some heaven and some other worlds, one comes back to the earth, and you know what? This is a better option than the previous one. The jeevātmā is born in the midst of great yogis, great mahatmas, already spiritually awakened people, those who are on a higher level on the spiritual scale. Athava yoginameva kule bhavati dhimatam. And Sri Krishna himself says, etadya durlabhataram janma yadidrasham. That kind of being born amidst either a son of a Mahatma or yogi, or doesn't have to be son or daughter, at a young age of 3 or 4, 7 or 8, somehow, though born to some parents of mediocre or lesser spiritual evolution, at a young age you somehow end up in the company of saintly people. Then your spiritual growth is accelerated. So, this comes closer to what happens after death. Then I take you to the 8th chapter. A question is raised by Arjuna again. The Gita has quite a lot of question and answer that speaks well for the environment that used to be in Sanatana Dharma. Students were allowed to ask questions. They were encouraged to question. On one hand, students were advised to trust their guru, to trust the scriptures, that's fine. But on the other, at the right time, in a proper way, please do ask any question. Do not hesitate. Do not suppress your curiosity. Arjuna several times asked questions to Sri Krishna. How are we to ensure that we die in a wise manner? What is the best way to die with thought of God? And the 8th chapter has wonderful guidance on that. First of all, Sri Krishna says in the 5th verse itself, Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaprayati tyajandeham sayatim. madbhavam sagacchati. If thanks to your practices, thanks to your good works, thanks to your letting go of all narrow mindedness, thanks to your developing impartiality, being equal to all, loving all, thanks to several such touch up, several forms of touch up for your personality, you know what happens at the time of death? You are not worried about your property that you are leaving behind, relatives, friends, name, fame, etc. Or rather, you say, I just want to lovingly remember God. And thanks to your studies, you have a good understanding of God. So you invoke, you bring in that understanding of God. And Sri Krishna says, someone who does that merges with God, comes to me, madbhavam sodhi gacchati. And then gives a very general principle. Whatever you think of, that will decide your next life. At the time of dying, the final thought, Swami Vivekananda in one of his talks gives the example of a ball which enters a room. That room has 6 walls. It's a hexagon. And that ball hits one wall. Then from there it goes, hits the second wall, then the third wall, the fourth wall. It goes hitting the different walls. But at some point it comes again to the door through which it had entered. It goes out. And in the 19th century itself, as you know, Vivekananda dropped his body in 1902. So his years of major contribution were towards the fag end of 19th century. There itself he talked a little basic physics. He said the speed and the direction. In physics we have a word momentum. The momentum is a vector. It has both velocity and you know that how much weight, etc. Take velocity itself, it's a vector. Speed is a scalar. Velocity is not only meters per second but also in what direction. So after hitting several walls, it comes out of the door. When it exits, it's the net velocity, both in terms of speed gathered or lost and direction that finally gets determined. Gives that example, Swami Vivekananda, and says that is how next life also is decided. You did good things, you did bad things. When you look back, your life is all a mixed bag. But at the time of dying, thank God, you just thought of Sri Krishna. You just thought of Shiva. But general principle is, what if somebody thinks about Coca-Cola? At the time of dying, if one thinks it's a long time since I ate onion uttapam, suppose some eatable, some drink, then alas, if that is the net result of all your thoughts and actions, pretty much next life will be shaped by that. You will again be in an environment where you will get the opportunity to pursue that drink, that eatable, that sense experience, and so on. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. There is a shloka, 8.6. Tam tameva eti. So behind the utterances of Sri Krishna, there is not only what is drawn from the Vedas, but a whole lot of sound logic. Sound logic, after studying it very carefully, you will say, wow, all this makes sense really. All this is so reasonable and amazing. The rishis gave us a certain body of revelations which is nowhere illogical. This body of revelations lifts us to a greater height. That's how a whole lot of very intelligent people who might have been in certain professions and who were eminent in those fields, towards the end, leave everything and study Vedanta exclusively. There are lots of such cases. Fanatics also go in various other outfits for so-called exclusive, but the fanatics have very, very shallow understanding, and they waste their energy in other things like trying to convert some more people into their membership rather than themselves going deeper into the real spirituality. In the eighth chapter, I have one more shloka to, one more or maybe a few more, one more referring to the moment of dying. Specifically, Sri Krishna says, if you can recite Om while dying, Om ityekaksharam brahma vyaharam ma manuttamam yaprayati tejandeham. There is a shloka, 8.13. Om iti. He upholds pranava, omkara, which is really worth considering. You and I should try to practice. However, in modern times, remembering Ram, remembering Krishna, remembering Shiva, remembering Devi, or remembering the Nirguna Nirakara Brahma Tattva. Through one of them, two of them, or many of them, what is important is, for heaven's sake, let go of your obsession with your own present personality. I am so and so. I was mayor of this town. In fact, I was earlier an actor and I was hero in many movies. And I went here, I went there. I. The personality that has to be dropped. One has to think of something divine, whereby I would use the word once more, the obsession with one's own little personality of this lifespan has to be weakened, has to be diluted. Now I come to an interesting aspect of this. What happens after death? Sri Krishna takes it up in the eighth chapter itself. He says there are two scenarios. Very small minority of people who die are so merited, they have lived such a righteous life. They have really worked hard on study of scriptures, meditation on God, serving people, and working for justice in the society in various forms. That those rare meritorious people go so high, they don't come back on the earth. Eventually, they get liberated. So let's call it the path of no return. And then there is the vast majority who may go to certain higher worlds because they too have done merit. As you know, in this world, even thieves, dacoits, mafia members also do some merit, or they harass and torture a lot of people, but then they also are attached to a few people. They pamper maybe some children, some grandchildren. They are in love with some X or Y, some community. They serve that community. Anyway, without going into much detail, none of us is totally a sinner. None of us is totally a punyatma. We have our punya, we have our papa. Therefore, the Gita says, because of our punya merit, we go to heaven, but after some time, come back. So it is said in one verse, very interesting, it drew my attention, especially when I was pondering over certain Christian principles. In Christianity, it is said, unless you surrender to Jesus, you go to hell. That is, a lot of Christians believe that. Jesus will save you. In Sanatana Dharma, Hinduism, we don't say that, but there's one verse, 8.16, 8.16, the 16th verse in the 8th chapter, where Sri Krishna says, those who surrender to me are liberated. All others, he doesn't say will go to hell, all others have to come back on the earth, again get into this life of struggle, life of competition, life of, again working towards one's livelihood, and so on. Abrahma bhuvana lokaha punaravartino Arjuna. So many worlds, Brahmaloka, then Bhuvarloka, Swarga, Satyaloka. There are various lokas, realms where living beings, that is, these atmas, go. They come back to the earth. But mamupetya tu kaunteya punarjanma na vidyate. There is a powerful statement. Resembles very much Jesus Christ saying, surrender to me, submit to me, you are you are sent to heaven. There the words are heaven versus hell. In Sanatana Dharma, liberation, if you attain the highest supreme understanding, or punarapi janam, punarapi maranam. Again born, again dying, again born, again dying. And in karma bandhana, you stay in karma bandhana, bondage. So this point of return and the path of return and path of no return, path of no return being a much higher possibility. I would not call it the highest possibility because in Shankara Vedanta, the non-dual philosophy of Shankaracharya, the highest that can happen to you is before even you die, you realize your true nature. In our tradition, we have always believed that someone like Ramana Maharshi, someone like Nisargadatta, someone like Anandamayi Ma, and as per our faith and devotion, maybe many other Mahatmas, we believe that they were done with everything before even their body drops down. So that's called Jivan Mukti. That is the highest possible. But then there is the Krama Mukti. You go to certain Brahmaloka and over there, eventually from there itself, you go beyond all limitations. Because otherwise, no matter where you are, you have a separate identity. If you are in heaven, there are others also in heaven. And one morning you may feel a bit morose that other guys are doing better. Though pretty much all of you have all the comforts within reach, but still, like it happens in this world also. With great effort, you and I get into some nice place, get into some nice job. Our children also are doing well. And there are moments where we feel, ah, I think I have done well. How long does it last? After a few days, we find someone else whose children have done even better, whose house is even bigger. Then we say, oh, whereas all these limitations, all this incompleteness, lock, stock, and barrel will vanish, will go when there is the Brahma Sakshatkara. So, eighth chapter, we had quoted it in our synopsis also, which went to all of you. There's a summary shloka, 26th, 8.26. Shukla Krishne gati hyete jagata shashvate mate ekaya yatyana vrittim anyaya avartate punaha. They have been labeled Shukla and Krishna. No, they are not literally white and black. It's like, many years ago when I heard there is something called Bluetooth technology, I was puzzled with it. In spite of my science background, I thought, why is it called Bluetooth? Where is it blue and where does it have a tooth? And then somebody said, why are you getting so, bogged down with the name? It's just a name given. It's a name given for a certain technology of transmission. Certain information, certain signal goes from point A to point B, over electromagnetic wave, modulated in some way. There's a whole technology, right? So someone gave the name Bluetooth. It's neither blue nor does it have a tooth. Like that, Shukla and Krishna, please do not mix it up with any other kind of white and black. It's just two names. They could have, if Sri Krishna had given the Gita in modern times, he would have perhaps said, there are two paths to go up to heaven and other worlds. One is called path A and another is called path B. Instead of A and B, he called them Shukla and Krishna, white and black. But Shukla is Path A is one where you go to a certain very high region called Brahmaloka, not liberated yet, but you reach very high, and over there you further progress. Makes sense, because as you and I go higher and higher in any field, then a small number among us even dig deeper. I have reason to believe that even after all the glory that Einstein got through his specific theory of relativity and general theory of relativity and what else, so many other things, even in his last months of life, he was, I have reason to believe, contemplating about certain advanced issues. I believe he had difficulty with quantum physics, and I am told towards the end he accepted that quantum physics, etc. So it's like that. A rare few go to Brahmaloka, but they don't stop. There also they inquire, who am I? On a deeper level, on a more intense note, and then they get liberated. The ninth chapter says, living beings, that is, these atmas, the conditioned soul, you may call it, they go to heaven, but when their merit is exhausted, they come back, they fall down on the earth as though. Interesting. We had one Swami Purushārtha in Chinmaya Mission. He used to say, commenting on the 21st verse of ninth chapter, the shloka says, Kshine punye martya lokam vishanti. When your punya is over, you come back to the earth. Swamiji used to joke because he used to make short trips to USA those days in the late 80s or early 90s. He used to say it is like getting a 6 months visa to USA. You go from Bombay to Chicago or New York, then to a couple of other places. By then the 6 months are over. Kshine vise Bharatam Vishanti, he used to say. When your visa is over, you got to return to your home country. The analogy is fit, is good. When the punya, merit gets over, you come back. So friends, in all these issues, basically Bhagavad Gita only focuses on the continuous journey of the jeevātmā. Jeevātmā may go to higher, happier regions or lower, unhappier circumstances or environments. In the 14th chapter, Bhagavan Sri Krishna puts the same truth in the language of gunas. If you and I become more and more sattvic, urdhvam gacchanti sattvastah, there is a shloka. Those who are more sattvic go quite high in the total scenario of the universe. Earth is not at all the only place. The cosmology, the complete view of the creation as found in Geetā and other scriptures talks about multiple worlds, multiple lokas, some visible, some not visible to the human eyes. There is a certain uh, frame of reference. Urdhvam gacchanti sattvastha, madhye tishtanti rajasa, jaganya guna vrattastaha, adho gacchanti tamasa. Therefore, one more way of refining ourselves is we must stand guard against rajas and tamas, the three gunas, SRT, sattva, rajas, tamas. Rajas and tamas can give us temporary happiness, pleasure, but then they pull us down. We must have broader and broader outlooks. In the 11th chapter, to go back a little, Sri Krishna claims that it is he and his will that causes death. Why do people die? Of course, I'm going a few inches away from the main question. What happens after one dies is the main question. But first of all, why do people die? It is God's law that a bud has to die so that the flower blooms. All change is a precursor, is a forerunner of something else that is created. Destruction precedes a new creation. So in Vishwarupa Darshana, that's 11th chapter, Sri Krishna says, Kalosmi loka kshaya krit pravriddaha. I am Kala, translated by some as time. Some others translate that as death. Last year, the movie Oppenheimer came and hit the screens everywhere, all over the world. I have not seen that movie, but it was said Oppenheimer was very fond of a few verses in Bhagavad Gita. One of them was this 11.32. Halosmi loka kshayakrit pravruddha. I don't remember what translation he adopted, but when that movie came, scholars in India were divided into two groups. One group said what Oppenheimer understood from that shloka is right. Many others said Oppenheimer misunderstood that shloka. So scholars had great good time, arguing with each other. Oppenheimer is dead and gone. As you know, he was so charmed, enchanted by the 11th chapter. So when he did that experiment of exploding the test atom bomb, the deserts in somewhere in USA, the very famous project, when it went up and so much energy was released, as you know, he remembered a shloka from the 11th chapter. Sri Krishna gives his Vishwarupa and Arjuna or Sanjaya, one of them says, Ah, if 1000 suns were to rise at the same time, even that splendor would be not as much as the splendor, the light, the radiance, etc., of this cosmic divine form of Sri Krishna. Divi Surya Sahasrasya Bhaved Yugapaduttitha. That is the shloka. So likewise, in the 11th chapter, it is said, I am death. And it is in that only, there are many other shlokas of that kind. One of them says, Sri Krishna says in that, Arjuna, let me tell you, whoever has to die in this war is already killed by me. Whoever has to survive already is granted a fresh lease of life. You just are an instrument. Whether you throw your arrows or not, those who are to die are already dead by my will. Very thought provoking statement. It totally dismisses free will and human effort, everything as per God's will. Recently, a Stanford professor wrote a long article which went round. He said, after a lot of study and thinking and contemplation, I tend to believe that there is no free will. What appears as free will, my decision, is not really my decision. It is the product of so many influences. I have been made to think like this, made to. Sometimes last moment we change our decision. And then in this view that the Stanford professor expressed, even that last moment change of decision also is not really anything that came from nowhere. It is result of some other background cooking up, working up in our brain. Last moment you change the decision. Instead of flying to a northern city, you fly to a southern city, like that. Lastly, I must mention to you that Kathopanishad says, Yatha karma yatha shrutam. What happens to us after death is decided by yatha shrutam. How much of spiritual education we attained or got in this life. Yatha shrutam. Shrutam literally means heard, but heard means how much wisdom we gained. Yatha karma, and how much good works we did. Depending on the work we did, actions we performed, and in wisdom we attained, our future, what happens after death, after ending of this particular lifespan, is shaped. Now, I already said before that as regards what happens in the first 24 hours, what happens in the first 5 days, what happens in the first 10 days, and how long does a jeevātmā take before being born again? Can the jeevātmā be born as quickly as within a month? Maybe in our own neighborhood, the grandfather died in January, but is already reborn in February in that other house. We have reason. There are people who believe a new child born a mile away is our own grandfather who passed away last month, because there are some they have their own reason. So all this, I am not competent to talk on that at this moment, but perhaps sometime I will study Garuda Purana, and there is some literature. Sanatana Dharma has such a vast spectrum, vast range of scriptures which touch upon numerous issues. Probably Manusmriti has some light to throw on those things. But many of us who do this Titi, Shraddha or Antya Samskara in our homes know bits and pieces. It's about the 10th day that certain ritual is done where it is believed that the jeevātmā really leaves the campus. Otherwise, for about 10 days, the jeevātmā is hanging around. And there are some rituals, there are some mantras, there are some orchestrations. I was present in one situation where two Brahmins were called and they were given food and clothes and everything. Some mantras were chanted and then they walked away. And I was told, look how they walk away. They won't be looking back. They are asked not to look back. They go away, and when they go away, this Jeevātmā who dropped the body, whose body was burnt, let us say, 9 days before, but the Jeevātmā is hovering around there, that Atma also goes with them, and so on. So there are stories, there are beliefs, there are theories, and even when the Jeevātmā leaves the campus or the surroundings of the house where death took place, after so many days, on that Jeevātma's way to heaven or hell, some river is talked of, Vaitarani Nadi, and so on. So I'll try to present those uh, certain ideas in some other webinar. But today we have actually talked about the spiritual perspective, how there is further growth, how there is probably emancipation on a higher level. And at the other extreme, I must quickly say, Kathopanishad says, generally, we come back as human beings, but in some rare cases, if we have done something most terrible, most insensitive, highly unjust, highly unfair, unthinkably cruel or coarse or gross, then we could come back as Thanu, means a, a tree which doesn't move. Yoni manye prapadyante sharirattvaya dehinaha sthanu manye anusayanti yatha karma yatha shrutam. So, Hinduism or Gita, Upanishads do support the possibility. There is a possibility in case of somebody who acted with such insensitivity that he doesn't deserve to be in human body. He could come back and be in a form of an animal or a plant, but that's not forever. Nothing is ever. There is no eternal condemnation. Eternally into hell is not endorsed by Sanatana Dharma. After being in the animal body or the tree body, plant body, etc., after a long time, when the sin is exhausted, the soul emerges again and hopefully having learned the lesson, will now walk the right path. So it's both interesting and to some people not very interesting. They think this is all some cock and bull story. So that happens with religion, with spirituality anyhow. Let me pause here and welcome questions or comments by any of you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva. If you are asking by voice, turn your microphone on and then speak.
Swamiji, this is Sai Prakash.
Yes, Sai, how are you? Tell me.
Today I was listening to J. Krishnamurthy's lecture where he's saying somebody has a question, is a God. And it's very interesting, the various things it does. So in the light of that, where he says, what is there to believe which we don't know, which we have not seen? This kind of faith in something which all the religious scriptures teach us is completely opposite to that kind of thinking. So I was just wondering what should be our thinking or our thought, and what should we tell others who not follow, but who take our guidance. Thank you, Swami.
Yeah, nice question. Actually, we should facilitate some thinking, some discussion, and then not force anything on anybody. We should leave them to their own choice. In this world, from time immemorial, there have been people who are drawn to God, who have had visions of God, who have done miracles, who have received miraculous benefits from some higher power. There are plenty of examples. Not only God Himself, even some gurus like Guru Raghavendra in Mantralaya and many other gurus have done wonders. Though there are people who don't believe in it, that's different. Shirdi Sai Baba and so on. From time immemorial in this world, there have been people whose mindset is like that. So the Buddha also addressed such people and just focused on mind control, calming the mind. So J. Krishnamurti also comes a bit closer to the work of the Buddha. J. Krishnamurti put aside all kinds of beliefs. He said beliefs are an escape. You are taking an escape route. So there is some truth in what he says, but not the complete truth. J. Krishnamurti appealed to a large number of people and he did not help. He was of no help whatsoever to another large number of people too. Lot of people only got confused. They stopped going to temple, but did not grow in any other manner, neither here nor there. Therefore, you must be true to your conscience. If you truly appreciate J. Krishnamurti's approach, it appeals to you, go ahead, because ultimately, like Ramana Maharshi, he also focuses on eradication or erasure of the ego, the little self. He calls it, he doesn't use the word ego, he uses the word self. The ending of the self is opening, opening yourself up in compassion, in love, and so on. Makes sense. But that doesn't work for many other people. It's just like many, allopathy, homeopathy, and so many forms of medicine. What worked very well for one person doesn't work at all for another. So it's quite a huge field. Krishnamurti is not the final word on everything, but I myself am highly involved in Krishnamurti, and I know it's a magnificent body of teachings, but large number of people are not able to make head or tail of it. If you find it inspiring, wonderful, and share it with people, but don't.
I don't find it inspiring or anything, Swamiji, but sometimes I share with people who believe in too many things without having any thought of that. Especially, present day, people are believing in a lot of things. I don't want to name it; it will be wrong in this forum. So
Yeah,
such
yeah,
people, I sometimes share them and tell, see, this is what he says. What do you say for that? But
correct,
ultimately, I think we have to understand, like Einstein said, there is a superpower or there's a cosmic force, there is some force.
correct.
Otherwise, things cannot run so meticulously and everything. Even the karma theory is very, very scientific. So,
Right,
very good, Swamiji. And only
correct.
one small thing, Swamiji, the Western
Uh-huh.
philosophy is, I
Yeah.
think, till about Spinoza or something, they did not
Hmm.
believe in God or anything. They were based on humanitarian principles or things. I don't think they even said about karma, rebirth, but somehow they managed to evolve a very good code of conduct for people and a good civilized society they managed to get.
Hmm.
And later, of course, some amount of spirituality, godliness, and all is added. But that is the kind of a thing. A lot of youngsters today, like I find my own son following that, Western philosophy, reading that and all that. Krishnamurti, of course, is an issue. It's a complicated issue sometimes. Thank you, Swamiji.
Welcome, welcome.
Nobody else could have asked this question but to you, because you're an expert on all the 3-4
Oh,
different.
no, I am not expert on anything, but something I have learned, I share it in a certain way. Some people like it. No
Thank you so
one,
much.
all of
Swamiji,
us
I have
have
got one
limited
question.
intelligence. Yes,
Can I?
Mr. Vishwakarma. Yeah.
One question I have got. If everything is prefix, as you said that God has, Krishna has said that I have already killed people, and you see Arjuna, then nothing you throw your bow or don't throw, they are already killed. What my question is, if everything is prefixed by God, then where karma comes? How karma comes? What is the role of karma? If everything is prefixed.
See, this theory that everything is prefixed is a wonderful theory, but you and I should not go by it.
Okay.
Because we must be true to our perception. We
That's
see
true.
that what we do changes the course of events. Suppose I go and talk in a very pleasing manner to somebody, that person becomes my friend. If I go and scold somebody, that person may become my enemy. So we see, in fact, even Shankaracharya in Brahma Sutra Bhashya says, you go towards a cow with a stick in hand, the cow runs away. You go
That's true.
towards a cow with some green grass, green leaves in your hand, the cow comes nearer to you, eats. So what we do, how we do, determines the response of the others. Therefore, Gita also, in a certain philosophical context, has said it. But coming down to our plane, Bhagavad Gita asks us to do what appeals to our conscience, what we think is right to do. So
That's true.
dharma, that is dharma. We should do dharma and keep away adharma. In Kathopanishad, you have the Shreya and Preya. So what is good and what could be pleasing, what could be giving us some pleasure for a while, but eventually if it causes harm, we should avoid it. A student, enjoys watching cricket. Tomorrow he has an examination. And when tomorrow he is not able to write answers, he cries in the examination hall. While watching the cricket match late up to 11 p.m. or 12 midnight, he said, wow, I don't care about the exam tomorrow. But tomorrow he cries. Therefore, the Gita, the Upanishad, all of them say, please understand your own life so far. Don't repeat your mistakes. You can watch the recording maybe of this cricket match or something. Now study for tomorrow's exam. So my summary answer to us is, to you is that predetermination may have certain philosophical beauty. Even Stanford professor went by it. Let it remain there. But you and I should again and again see what is right for me to do. This seems right for me to do, I'll do it. And we should even walk the extra mile for doing so.
Swamiji, there's
But
a
what I see, whenever we see a bad man doing some bad thing, with his own perspective, he is doing a good thing. I am not able to understand which is good and which is bad. For example, a butcher has to cut his meat for his livelihood. As a saint, he has to pray for his other things. So, what is good and what is bad is a very, very difficult thing to
Very
understand.
difficult to decide. Therefore,
Yes.
I repeatedly use the word conscience. You and I have to be true to our conscience.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome, welcome. Yes, Vibhaji was saying something.
there's a
Swamiji,
question on chat box.
Swamiji, I was just going to say that Mr. Vishwakarma was addressing what you had said in 11th chapter. Krishna says, I am death. Whoever has to die already killed by my will.
Yeah,
Whoever has to live lives by my will. So if you're saying that that is just one of the opinion, I thought this was, you are saying Krishna's opinion.
No, it's a higher philosophical point of view. It could be the truth. But for you and me, since our perception makes us, look at what we do has all the significance, so we must try to go by our inner voice. Probably down the road, we can look back and say, that day I felt the course of action A was good, I did it. But now I think that God made me do it. So we'll put the label later on as God, it was God's will. But at the present moment, it's in my hands. So this free will and destiny are a very complicated topic. Each has its own arguments. I take a question by Parmi. What does Geetā say about euthanasia? Explicitly, Geetā doesn't touch about euthanasia. Euthanasia, as all of you know, is the right to die. Somebody says, I want to die. He goes to a doctor and says, give me some injection that I, as the word goes, I am put to sleep. In some states, in some countries, it is against law. Neither the man has the legal right to die like that, nor the doctor has the right. In some countries, some states of some countries, it is permitted, I guess. There are both this euthanasia and the issue of mercy killing. Can a physician give some injection and put somebody to eternal sleep? Does he have the right? Out of mercy, because he says the patient is suffering. I want to bring the suffering of the patient to an end. No, that's against law in some countries. Now, your question is about Geetā. Geetā doesn't talk on mercy killing or euthanasia, but Geetā talks of general principles. So it's subject to interpretation by saints and speakers on Geetā and so on. It might interest you to say that Swami Chinmayānandaji said nobody has the right to take anybody's life. So he opposed mercy killing, but he approved taking away artificial support. What is that? Ventilator and many other things, right? He said that you take off. The doctors can take off with consultation with the family. But to give an injection and to make a patient die, mercy killing, is not permitted in our scriptures, was the opinion of Swami Chinmayānandaji. About euthanasia also, he said the man could be in some deranged state of mind. He should not rush with that. He should consult some wise people. In fact, if I remember right, in his book, there is a book by Swami Chinmayananda, published in 91 or so, on wings and wheels. There all these modern topics were discussed, cloning and euthanasia and mercy killing and homosexuality and all those. So there he says about euthanasia, that every small town or so should have a 5-member or 7-member committee who can go into it. And if they permit an individual who is saying, I am having severe headache, day and night I suffer, allow me to die, permit me to die. If that 7-member committee approves it after studying properly, perhaps it could be approved. So these are going by general principles of human values, where it is compassion, where it is taking law in our hands. Sometimes it's difficult to draw the line. So if it is true compassion, Geetā endorses it. If in the name of compassion, the doctor or anybody sees what is in it for him, some personal benefit, then it will be unjust. So yeah, in one sentence, Geetā doesn't touch. Once somebody asked, does Geetā permit us to smoke a cigarette? Again, there is no mention of cigarette in the Bhagavad Gita. But Geetā only says, don't be enslaved, don't be, dictated by your pleasure pursuit. Geetā talks of moderation. Therefore, it's possible to, incidentally, it's possible to interpret that theory of moderation, saying Geetā doesn't mind if somebody smokes a cigarette or two, that's about it. But if he goes on smoking, goes on drinking and spoiling his liver and spoiling his lungs, definitely it's not approved by religious books. So moderation, when you have some control over what you are doing, looks like it's approved. So all this is subject to interpretation. We'll take two last comments or questions, then wind up for the session. Does Prasad Garu want to say something?
Namaste, Swamiji. This
Namaste,
Let her
Sucheta
go
ji.
ahead. She also had that.
Sucheta.
Geetā. Yeah. Swamiji, free will is same as surrender, or if it is different, could you explain,
It's
please?
different. It's different. Free will is you figure out what is in your hands, and with full confidence in yourself, you say, I will do this. To go ahead saying, I will do this. I will put in my effort. Even if it is only 2 cents out of 100, I'll do my 2 cents. That is free will. Surrender doesn't preclude or exclude you are doing whatever is in your hands. But even if you are doing something from your side, surrender means you inwardly bow down to God and say, I am doing my best, but finally God alone decides. Even enabling me to do whatever I am doing is by God's grace. So you make God as an overarching principle. So under the canopy of God, your little 2 cents also is happening. So surrender is submission. Surrender is submitting your capacity, your powers, your intelligence to the higher. Free will is believing in what you can contribute. So they are
Thank you.
different. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Hari Om Swamiji.
Yes, Prasad ji.
Thank you very much for again shedding a lot of light and a very insightful, thought-provoking webinar. One question, you mentioned, quoting from the Geetā, that even if we remember God on the last moment of death, that alone is enough to to make us get liberated. Is that a way of encouraging us in terms of the power of being God-centric, or being having the bhakti spirit? Otherwise, if you can't take it literally and say that, well, during my life, I really don't think about God. I don't do sadhana. I have not gained the wisdom. Like the two things talk about, work and wisdom. So that seems like it's not fair. Just I'm taking a shortcut. I'm getting a free pass just by remembering God at my last breath.
You're
So
right.
is it really to say that if in one moment can take you to God, so if you devote your whole life, how much more consistent and beautiful it would be?
Correct. However, most commentators, most speakers on the Gita say that it's just not possible to think of God at the last moment unless you had done, if not day and night, a substantial amount of spiritual practice. So basically, they rule out the possibility of somebody living a immoral life and then somehow at the time of breathing his last, he just succeeds in remembering God. Say that's not possible.
Right.
And even if Ajamila or somebody, addressing his son Narayana, he didn't really think of God, but his son's name was Narayana. He called his son and still got moksha. That there also an explanation is given that some Purva Janma Punya had come up. And though he called his son Narayana, his mind did go to God Narayana, thanks to the Purva Janma. In this life, he was found to be very attached to his business, his wealth, his earnings, and so on. Therefore, on the whole, the last moment is not an solitary, excluded, compartmentalized affair. It is actually the net result of so much that we do during the life. Therefore,
that seems more
emphasis
logical.
is on, even if somebody, let's say somebody is already 74, never mind if you are not taught now, till you die, think as much as possible, study, attend satsangs, serve people, be kind, and all this is said.
That's very reassuring. And
All
Thank you,
right,
sir.
we'll meet again another day. Namaste.